Hey there, it's Carrie. How are you? I hope you are well and happy and are doing the absolute best you can in whatever way that looks like for you. This is episode 38, and we're going to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the subject of intimate partner violence and traumatic brain injury. Now, as a survivor of both, I understand the unique challenges that both of those situations bring. So, what I thought I'd do today is something a little bit different than what I've done before. I wanted to do something that would be a little more informative, something that those of you watching can see. So, I thought I would do a little slide presentation. So, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but we're going to do our best. This situation is that important to me. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slides. All right. So brain injury in a relationship involving abuse is much more common than we know, than we even think about. And while so many people right now are becoming more aware of it, there is still so much more that people need to know and need to learn about this subject. And the biggest problem is in getting people in these unique kinds of situations the help and support that they need. That is still the really big challenge that a lot of the leaders in this field that I'm so lucky I get to work with are trying to figure out. So, if we think about what a traumatic brain injury or a concussion is, it is any bump, blow, or jolt to the head, neck, or face, or by a hit to the body that causes the head and brain to move quickly back and forth. Now, it's not just, as the picture shows, not just a backward and forward movement. It can be a side to side movement. It can also be a rotation. So if you think about the brain sitting inside your skull, surrounded by the cerebral fluid that's in there that acts as a cushion, what happens is when you are moved in a certain way, the cushion isn't enough in there, and the brain will bang back and forth against the inside of your skull. And that causes concussion or brain injury. And it's not just the bumping back and forth against the skull. There can be tearing of some of the little connections in your brain, a tearing and a twist. So that can happen as well. So any blow to the head, neck, or face, being violently shaken, being slammed into floors, walls, doors, or furniture, causes the brain to slam back and forth inside of your skull, and then that twisting and tearing of those gentle tissues and connections inside of your brain. And here is just a quick video that kind of shows that.
Is a type of traumatic brain injury, or TBI, caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head, or by a hit to the body that causes your head and brain to move rapidly back and forth. This sudden movement can literally cause the brain to bounce around or twist in the skull, stretching and damaging the brain cells and creating chemical changes in the brain. What you might not know is that these chemical changes make the brain more sensitive to any increased stress or injury until it fully recovers.
So that's just sort of a visual for you to see kind of how that might happen. Now, I know for me, when I was in my abusive relationship, it was all of those things. It was violent shaking. It was being thrown into walls so hard the walls cracked, being thrown against the floor, against doors and walls and furniture, and being hit in the head and the face repeatedly with closed fists, with objects. I was hit repeatedly over the head with a gun butt. So it can be from many, many different things. And we're looking at the brain right now. So if you look at that picture, and it seems complicated, but each one of those areas, of course, is responsible for our different actions and behaviors and reactions and how we think and feel. So the frontal lobe you see in the red is what I call our logical brain. That is the part of the brain that's responsible for thinking and planning and logic and all of those things that we need. It's called executive function. It's the higher thinking level that we need to be able to use to get through our day. And as you see, it's right in the front of your skull. So this area is really, really particularly vulnerable to injury and to damage. And so if you look at, the different parts of the brain, like the parietal lobe, which controls language, and the temporal lobe, which is hearing and learning and feelings, if you are hit and have a concussion in any one of those areas, it's going to interfere with the way your brain processes things. And it's going to impact different areas of the brain depending on where your injury is. So this was my case, and I'm sure it may be for many of you the same thing. We have multiple repeated injuries when we are in an abusive relationship, one on top of the other, without time to heal. And, we know a lot about concussions in sports, like say in football, there's now a concussion protocol that goes into play. So, a football player is hit really hard in the head or the neck, they are immediately taken out. They are assessed. If they show any signs of brain injury or concussion, they are put in this protocol, and then, they are seen by a physician, and the physician works with them and watches them until they are healed, and then they are cleared to go back into play. But for those of us in an abusive relationship, we don't get that. We get hurt, we get hit again and again and again, and we do not have time to recover and heal. So those injuries compounded make things that much more difficult. And I know for me, when I was in my relationship, I was experiencing headaches and dizziness and confusion and memory problems, and my balance was so off. I mean, and it still is. I still have a lot of impacts. I would go too quickly around a corner or around a table or something like that, and I would just fall. And I still do. I have to be really careful about how I move. So by the time my injury was found, and that was due to a burst brain aneurysm I had in 1984, not due to the abuse. It was an extra bunch of nerves and blood vessels at the base of my brain that had been there since birth. And 4 months after I finally left the relationship, it blew. And during that time, the testing I went through showed signs of scarring and brain injury. So thinking about people who have had trauma throughout their lives, that changes the way the brain makes connections. People that are going through current trauma, That also changes the way the brain makes connections. And then brain injury on top of it. The impacts are pretty profound. So strangulation is another thing that can lead to brain injury. So strangulation is cutting off oxygen to the brain by applying any pressure to the neck or any area that restricts oxygen and blood flow to the brain. This can happen by someone putting their hands or arms on or around your neck and applying pressure. Someone using something around your neck to cut off oxygen, like a rope, a scarf, a belt, or something similar. Someone sitting on your chest, cutting off your airway and restricting your breathing. Strangulation is also not the same thing as choking, and I know a lot of people use the terms kind of interchangeably, but choking is like when you get a piece of food stuck in your throat. That's choking. Strangulation is the act of cutting off your airway and restricting blood flow and oxygen to your brain. And it takes minimal amounts of pressure to cause damage. I mean, just barely pressure can restrict that. And the longer the oxygen and blood flow are cut off to your brain, the more damage can happen. So, strangulation in an abusive relationship is a huge alarm bell to lethality. I mean, if you look at the slide, the odds for homicide increase by 750% for victims who have been previously strangled compared to victims who have never been strangled. So it is, for those of us that work in the field, and in my work with survivors over the years, if anybody ever says that, well, I was choked or I was strangled or I couldn't breathe, then that is a big red flag in the relationship. And with any of this, any type of brain injury, no matter how it happens, whether it's through hitting, through force, through strangulation, you often won't lose consciousness. Sometimes it will happen, but oftentimes you don't. So just because you didn't lose consciousness doesn't mean that there wasn't an injury. So that's something to think about and be aware of. So brain injury completely changes the way people think, feel, and act. So some of the cognitive symptoms, some of the brain thinking symptoms, we may struggle with poor memory, poor comprehension. We don't understand things well. Getting started on tasks. It's hard for us to get to a place where we can start something. Attention, maintaining attention and focus, super hard. Poor problem solving. It's often hard for us to work through things in a logical way. Because remember, especially if we've been hit in the front part of the brain where where our logic and thinking function can be damaged. Challenges with risk assessment. So what that means is we often don't realize that we're in as much danger as we're in. We sort of underplay it and don't give it the attention and the importance that it deserves. And again, executive functioning, that logic part of the brain isn't working well. So that can look like not following through with plans, not interested or engaged in things. You just feel like you don't care. You just feel numb. It can feel like people are unmotivated or lazy, and that is not true. It is the difficulty in functioning and taking steps needed to be able to get things done. You can be mentally fatigued easily. That is super common. Missing deadlines or appointments. If you're having problems with your memory and you're having problems following things, with things through logically, You're going to miss things. You're going to miss appointments. You're going to forget. You're not going to be able to remember. Not completing tasks or forms. It's really, really hard. Say you've left an abusive relationship and, one night and you end up in a shelter and the people at the shelter want you to fill out all these forms and answer all these questions. That's really, really hard and really not helpful. You have to have some paperwork done working in a shelter. I get that, but there needs to be a minimal amount of forms and things to be filled out when somebody first comes into a shelter. You can lose your train of thought, or not follow conversations. You're talking to somebody and, you miss parts of what are being said. Perfectly understandable. So physical symptoms, we've talked about some of this. A big one, sensitivity to light and sound. Bright lights, lots of noise are completely overwhelming, way too much to handle. Vision problems seeing, problems focusing, problems reading. Words and letters not appearing correctly on a page can happen. Poor sleep, either sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, waking up a lot. Brain injury really interferes with sleep. You can have seizures. You can have headaches, dizziness, poor balance, fatigue. If you've been strangled or had your airway cut off, you can have difficulty swallowing and you can have neck pain. So some of these things can look like just basic pain and discomfort, difficulties falling and staying asleep, problems waking up. I know I had that problem. It was really, really hard for me to wake up and come to consciousness, after trying to sleep at night. Problems with eyesight and hearing. I've lost over a quarter of my eyesight. So, it's a real thing that can happen. Having problems getting easily distracted, getting pulled away, your attention and focus aren't good. So you're not going to be able to stay on track. Feeling overwhelmed. That's a big one. Too much sensory input. Too much light, too much noise, too much going on. It is completely overwhelming, and you can actually just feel so overwhelmed to the point where you can shut down and not function well or at all. Tripping, bumping into things. I kind of talked about that, and having difficulty participating in regular activities, just functioning day to day, getting up in the morning. If you have children, getting them ready for school, going to a job, working, doing all of the things you have to do during the day can be that much more difficult when you have got a brain injury. So emotional symptoms too, easily frustrated. You can be more aggressive. I mean, you may just have these just overwhelming feelings of anger, even rage for no reason. Something that normally wouldn't bother you all of a sudden becomes a big deal. That can happen. Mood fluctuations. You can fluctuate back and forth, being happy, being super depressed, being angry, something that isn't normal for you. It kind of would describe that mood range. Impulsivity. We can be impulsive. We can say and do things without thinking it through, without thinking about, the consequences of our actions. We can do things like impulsively spend money, impulse buying, things like that, not thinking about the consequences of our actions. Mental health can become worse. I mean, think about all of the trauma, just the trauma itself of being in an abusive relationship. And then, with that comes depression, anxiety, panic disorders, PTSD, and brain injury just makes all of that so much worse. You may look and feel because of some of those things like, you're not following the rules. You're not doing what others feel you should be doing. Say you're doing things without thinking. That's that impulsivity. trouble getting along with others. Things may feel differently to you. You may react differently to things. You could challenge others, things that normally wouldn't be a big deal to you. You kind of get more involved than you would. You challenge things, you get extra defensive. Things like that can happen. Not following directions, at a job or something like that. That's a big problem. Talk about hopelessness. You may feel hopeless. You may withdraw. You may isolate. You may shut down. That's kind of that overloaded, oversensory overwhelm, and you just shut down and don't function. Threatening to harm self or others. That's also something that is extremely, extremely critical. If you feel that you are wanting to harm yourself or harm someone else, you need to reach out to someone immediately for help. Call 911. Don't hesitate. So thinking about all those things that we've talked about, is it any wonder that those of us who've been in intimate partner violence relationships have such a hard time functioning in our daily lives? No, it's not. It's completely understandable. So this seems like a no-brainer to a lot of people, but getting medical attention is a key piece. Only assessment by a medical professional can help identify what's going on. So impacts of brain injury can and do get better with proper identification, therapies, and treatments. You can recover. It is not something that will be that way forever. But when you're in a relationship with an abusive partner, one of the last things the abuser wants you to do is get help and seek medical attention. They don't want anybody knowing what's going on at home. They don't want anybody knowing that they're hurting you. They don't want to get in trouble. So they keep you, or they keep a survivor from getting medical attention. What I would urge you to do if you are in a situation like that and you need medical attention, try to find some way to get to an ER, an urgent care, a doctor. Do whatever you have to do. If you can do it safely, try to get medical attention. If you cannot, here are some things at home that you can do to take care of yourself, to help heal. And again, this is really hard, and I know it is, and it's not always possible, but do the best you can. So complete physical and brain-mind rest for at least 24 to 72 hours after the injury in any way possible. So this includes avoiding screens, taking a break from work or school if you can, limiting reading, limiting things where you have to think and concentrate. Avoid bright lights and lots of overwhelming, sounds and noise. Try to keep yourself in as quiet and dark an environment as you can, and return to normal activities gradually as you feel that you can. Again, if you are in a situation right now where you're in an abusive relationship, I know the limits that you probably have. I know how difficult it is for you to get help. I am urging you, if you need medical attention, to try to safely find a way that is not going to get you in trouble or put you in danger. But if not, those are some things at least you can do to try to help yourself heal. So if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, needs support, needs resources, please contact me. There is my email. You can message me through my website. I have social media, but please feel free to use that email and reach out to me if you need to. Also, remember, if you are in a relationship and you need immediate help, please do not hesitate to dial 911. Don't worry about the what if. Don't worry about the what after. If you feel that your life, your children's life, your pets' lives are in immediate danger, please call 911. Your life and their lives could depend on it. If you need help and support in safety planning or leaving an abusive relationship and other resources, you can always call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 24/7. They are there. They will help you learn to leave safely. They will provide resources for shelters in your area if you need it. We've talked too about safety planning and leaving safely and all of that. And you can also contact me for help and support and resources at any time. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that it's made sense and it's connected with you. And it is so, so crucial that we do everything we can to raise awareness of just how common traumatic brain injury is in intimate partner violence. Thank you for watching. If you're listening, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, favorite, follow me wherever you see me, wherever you hear me. And I want you to please take extra good care of yourself. And we'll talk soon.